That carton of milk in your fridge right now might not be what you assume it is. Most Australians believe milk is simple, just fresh dairy from local farms. But when you look closer at processing methods, ownership structures, and labelling terms, the differences between brands become more complex than many shoppers realise. In the 8th place, Coles brand fresh milk sets the benchmark for affordability in Australian supermarkets. Owned and processed directly by Coles since 2019, this private label milk relies on high temperature, short-time pasteurisation and homogenisation, industry standards that deliver a consistent product with a shelf life of 7 to 14 days when refrigerated. The price typically sits between $1.40 and $1.60 per litre, making it the most budget-friendly option on the shelf. On the packaging, consumers find the phrase "Made in Australia from Australian milk," but there are no details on specific farms or regions. While Coles highlights its direct sourcing from Australian dairy farmers, the lack of precise origin information leaves sourcing transparency at a minimum. For shoppers, this means a clear trade-off, lower prices, but limited insight into where the milk actually comes from.
Number 7. Woolworths brand milk brings a new layer of complexity to the supermarket fridge. This private label staple is produced by Woolworths Group, which operates its own dairy facilities and contracts with regional processors. Shoppers may not realise that the Woolworths range includes both standard fresh milk, pasteurised for a typical 14-day shelf life, and ultra-pasteurised lines that extend usability up to 21 days. Both sit side by side on shelves, often at nearly identical price points, usually between $1.30 and $1.50 per litre, making it difficult to distinguish processing differences without a careful label check. The wording on the carton varies by region, with some packs stating Australian milk and others using Made in Australia, reflecting subtle legal distinctions in sourcing claims. While Woolworths is more transparent than some rivals about local milk supply, the presence of ultra-pasteurised options means some consumers may encounter a taste or texture that is less fresh than expected. For those seeking clarity, it is a reminder to look closely at both the processing method and the origin statement on every bottle.
Number 6. Pura Milk brings a familiar name with a less obvious story. This brand is owned by Saputo Dairy Australia, a multinational company that acquired it from local hands in the early 2000s. Shoppers encounter Pura in both fresh and long-life formats, pasteurised milk in the chilled section, and UHT cartons on the ambient shelf. The fresh version typically lasts up to 14 days when refrigerated, while the UHT option can sit unopened for months, thanks to higher heat processing that can slightly alter taste and texture. Both formats are homogenised and standardised for fat and protein, aiming for consistency regardless of season. Prices range from $1.80 to $2.20 per litre, placing Pura above supermarket generics but below premium brands. On the inner panel, Pura sometimes notes sourcing from Victorian or Queensland farms, but these details are easy to miss. For consumers, the dual processing under one label raises questions about what fresh really means and whether regional sourcing is as transparent as it appears.
Number 5. A2 Milk stands apart for its protein-specific marketing and premium price tag. The A2 Milk Company is a publicly listed corporation, and it sources milk from Australian farms where herds are genetically screened to produce only the A2 beta-casein protein. This claim is backed by routine genetic testing protocols, and certification is required to support every batch. Processing follows the standard high-temperature, short-time pasteurisation used across most supermarket brands, resulting in a refrigerated shelf life of around 14 days. Fat and protein levels are standardised for consistency, but the selling point remains the exclusive A2 protein profile. Shoppers will notice a price per litre that ranges from $2.50 to $3, often the highest on the shelf for regular fresh milk. The packaging is clear about Australian sourcing and the A2 difference, but the cost raises questions about value, especially for families weighing premium claims against everyday budgets. Number 4. Masters Milk brings the focus to extended life chilled milk in Australian supermarkets. This next brand is one of the most widely purchased in Australia, which makes these details especially important to understand. Owned by Bega Group, an Australian listed company, Master's Milk is best known for its ultra-pasteurized lines. Ultra-pasteurization involves heating the milk to a higher temperature than standard pasteurization, extending its refrigerated shelf life to around 21 days or more. While this process makes the product convenient for busy households, higher heat processing can slightly alter taste and texture, giving the milk a subtle cooked note that some consumers may notice. The price per litre typically ranges from $1.70 to $2, placing it in the mid-tier for supermarket milk. On the label, Master's Milk states Australian sourcing but provides limited detail about specific farms or regions. For shoppers, the trade-off is clear: longer shelf life and consistent availability, but less information about where the milk was produced, and a taste profile that may feel less fresh than traditional pasteurised options.
Number 3. Norco Milk stands apart as one of the few farmer-owned cooperatives left on the Australian supermarket shelf. Norco is owned by its member dairy farmers in northern New South Wales and southern Queensland, with a business model that prioritises regional sourcing and supply chain transparency. Every carton of Norco milk is produced using high-temperature, short-time pasteurisation, a process that preserves fresh taste while ensuring safety, and delivers a typical refrigerated shelf life of around 14 days. The cooperative's approach to transparency goes further than most. Norco publishes a list of its member farms online, allowing consumers to trace the milk back to specific regions, a level of detail rarely found among corporate-owned brands. Fat and protein levels are standardised for consistency, and the price per litre generally falls between $2 and $2.40, reflecting both the cost of regional supply and the cooperative's commitment to paying its farmers. While Norco's higher price point may put it out of reach for some households, its emphasis on local ownership and traceable sourcing offers a distinct alternative to the multinational dominance seen at the very top of the market.
Number 2, Dairy Farmers represents a legacy name in Australian milk, but its story now reflects the multinational nature of the dairy aisle. Since 2019, Dairy Farmers has been owned by Lactalis Australia, a subsidiary of the French multinational Lactalis Group, which holds the largest market share in the country. While many shoppers associate the brand with local heritage, the reality is more complex. Dairy Farmers milk is produced using a mix of high-temperature, short-time pasteurisation and ultra-pasteurisation, depending on the state and the specific product line. This means shelf life can range from 14 to 21 days in the chilled section, with subtle differences in taste and texture possible between batches. Prices typically sit between $1.90 and $2.30 per litre, placing Dairy Farmers in the mid-tier for supermarket milk. Sourcing statements on the packaging vary by region and product, sometimes naming local farms and other times offering only broad claims such as Australian milk. This patchwork approach to supply and processing means that consistency and transparency can shift from one state to another. For consumers, the trusted Dairy Farmers label now signals more about multinational market presence than clear local origins, raising questions about what brand loyalty really guarantees at the supermarket fridge. And finally, in first place, Paul's Milk sits at the crossroads of Australian supermarket trust and consumer uncertainty. With a name that's been a fixture in fridges for generations, Paul's is now owned by Lactalis Australia, the local arm of the world's largest dairy company. While many shoppers associate Paul's with everyday reliability, the reality is more complex. The brand's national distribution covers both pasteurised fresh milk and longer life UHT variants, all processed to comply with the strict standards set by Food Standards Australia New Zealand. Fresh Paul's milk typically carries a shelf life of around 14 days when refrigerated, while UHT cartons can last unopened for up to 6 months. Both formats are homogenised and standardised for fat and protein, aiming to deliver a uniform taste and texture regardless of season or region. Prices for Paul's fresh milk generally range from $2.10 to $2.50 per litre, placing it above supermarket private labels, but still within reach for most households. What sets Paul's apart is the inconsistency in sourcing information on its packaging. Depending on the state, labels might reference Australian milk or highlight processing in a particular region, but rarely provide details about specific farms or supply chains.
This patchwork approach means that two identical-looking cartons can be filled with milk sourced and processed in entirely different locations. For families who value transparency, this lack of clarity raises questions about what the Paul's name truly guarantees. As the last brand in this investigation, Paul's brings together the key themes of ownership, processing variety, and sourcing transparency. For anyone with a Paul's carton in the fridge, it's a timely reminder to read the label closely and to consider what information is missing as much as what's on display. Across all 8 brands, one pattern stands out. What is printed on your milk carton often tells you more about ownership, processing, and sourcing than most consumers realise. Australian milk is not uniform. It is shaped by choices at every step. In today's market, informed shopping starts with reading the label. Check your fridge.